People say love is simple when it looks steady, quiet, predictable. And if someone looked at the Miller house from the outside, they would have believed exactly that. A small one-story home tucked into a quiet suburban county, a white mailbox, trimmed lawn, warm porch light, and a front door painted a comforting navy blue. Nothing dramatic, nothing strange. Just a home that looked like it belonged on a postcard of the American dream. Sarah Miller believed that too, or she wanted to. Every morning she left for her shift at the emergency room before sunrise. Her scrub still smelled faintly of detergent and antiseptic. Her hair was always pulled back the same way, tight, neat, controlled not because she liked it, but because there was no room for softness in the rush of emergencies. She'd kiss her husband Ethan on the cheek before leaving. "Coffee's on the counter," she whispered every morning. He never woke up to answer. She never questioned it. Not yet. Ethan ran a small real estate development business, one of those jobs people never fully understood but assumed meant success. He dressed the part polished shoes, expensive cologne, a watch that didn't tick, it glided. At dinner, he told stories about zoning deals, investors, future projects. And Sarah would nod, smile, and believe him because trust was the foundation, right? But sometimes her stomach twisted, like the night she noticed the new leather wallet, the one he hadn't mentioned. Or the unfamiliar name on a credit card bill, a business expense, he said. Or his abrupt anger when she gently asked why their savings account was lower than the month before. He kissed her forehead and laughed. "Babe, you worry too much. I've got this." But the way he said it didn't soothe her. It silenced her. The truth is, abuse rarely begins with screaming. It begins quietly with subtle shifts, tiny omissions, unanswered questions, and a pressure so soft you can't name it. Sarah tried to shake it off. She told herself, "He's working hard. He's stressed. This is marriage. This is normal." And maybe that lie would have settled. Maybe it would have woven itself into the walls of that perfect little house if it weren't for one night. A night that didn't look important at all. Just a Tuesday. Sarah came home late, exhausted. Her legs ached, her badge still clipped to her scrub top. Ethan was in his office door, half closed, voice low. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop. But 2 words slipped through the crack like a knife. "She'll never find out." Sarah froze. Her heartbeat wasn't fast, it was heavy. The kind of rhythm your body makes when it already knows the truth, but your mind isn't ready. Ethan laughed softly on the other side of the door. Not a normal laugh. A confident one. A secretive one. A dangerous one. Later that night, Ethan wrapped his arm around her in bed as if nothing was wrong. As if the world was exactly how she believed it was. But her body stayed tense. Her eyes stayed open. And for the first time since she married him, Sarah wondered, what if love wasn't safety? What if home wasn't protection? What if the person she trusted most was already building her future disaster? The house was quiet. Too quiet. And that was the beginning. Not of their marriage, but of the unraveling. It started with little things easy to excuse. Ethan breathing heavier after climbing the stairs. His hands swelling, his skin looking pale, almost grey under the kitchen light. Nights where he fell asleep on the couch claiming he was just tired, yet his chest rose and fell as if every breath was borrowed from someone else. Sarah noticed everything because nurses always notice. But noticing and admitting are 2 different worlds. Maybe it's stress, she told herself. Maybe he's just working too hard. Or maybe, and she hated the thought, maybe something was deeply, silently wrong. The day everything changed was a Friday. Sarah came home from a 14-hour shift, expecting the usual, the porch light, the coffee mug in the sink, the silence. Instead, she found Ethan slumped against the kitchen counter, one hand gripping the edge, the other pressed tight against his chest. His breathing was sharp, desperate. Ethan, look at me." He tried to speak, but only managed one word. Help! Her body moved before her brain could catch up, instinct taking over. She checked his pulse, oxygen signs, skin tone, swelling the list automatic, clinical, rapid. And in that moment, she wasn't his wife. She was a medical professional trying to keep someone alive. The ER was a blur of alarms, rushing staff, fluorescent lights that never dimmed. Ethan lay on the hospital bed, hooked up to machines, monitors drawing lines of warning across dark screens. Doctors came and went with words Sarah already understood and yet dreaded to hear out loud. Finally, a nephrologist walked in, slow, steady, rehearsed. His tone was gentle, too gentle. Ethan, your lab results show advanced kidney failure. Stage 4. Ethan blinked, confused, stunned, almost empty. Sarah didn't blink at all. She stared at the monitor, then at the lab printouts, then at her husband, the man who months ago had laughed behind a half-closed office door. The doctor continued, "You'll need dialysis soon, and long-term survival will depend on a transplant." Silence. The kind of silence that changes a marriage. That night, Ethan cried not loudly, but quietly into Sarah's sweater, as if the sound itself might make the truth heavier. I don't want to die," he whispered. And something inside Sarah cracked, not fear, not confusion, but duty. Love mixed with responsibility in a way that left no space for question. She held his face and whispered back, "You won't. I'm here. We'll fight this." But part of her, the part buried deep beneath loyalty, felt something else. A warning. Because illness doesn't just test the body, it tests loyalty, power, control, and truth. Weeks passed with appointments, specialists, dialysis schedules. Life became measured in lab numbers instead of time. Then came the call, the compatibility results. The nurse smiled gently. "Sarah, you're a match." Ethan exhaled shakily, reaching for her hand like a drowning man grabbing the last rope left in the world. "It has to be you," he said. "Not please, not would you consider. Just, it has to be you." And Sarah, still holding on to the kind of love that believes sacrifice means safety, nodded. "Yes, I'll do it." But later, when she sat alone in her car, the world quiet except for the dull ticking of the dashboard clock, reality hit her. Giving a kidney wasn't a gesture. It was a life sentence for both of them. And there, in the silence, one haunting thought returned. If something feels wrong before the storm, what will the storm reveal? The engine hummed. Streetlights blurred through her tears. And the question she never wanted to ask finally surfaced. Will saving him cost me more than an organ? The night didn't answer. But some days she would. Some decisions feel like love. And some decisions only look like love until time exposes what they really were. For Sarah, signing the transplant consent forms felt like the ultimate expression of devotion. A promise. A vow she wasn't asked to make at the altar, but one she now believed her marriage demanded. It happened on a quiet morning in the hospital's pre-surgery wing. The world smelled like antiseptic and metal. A low hum of machines blended with distant footsteps. Nurses moved quickly yet gently, like people trained to carry fear without letting it spill. Ethan sat in a wheelchair beside her not because he needed it, but because protocol required it. He looked smaller than usual, vulnerable, fragile. It stirred something protective in her. And that feeling protection was exactly what blinded her. A hospital administrator arrived with a clipboard stacked thick with paperwork. Pages filled with legal terms, medical risks, consent language, insurance authorizations lines to initial, boxes to check. Sarah had seen forms like these hundreds of times as a nurse. But signing as a donor, that was different. Terrifying and sacred. The administrator began explaining each page, but halfway through, Ethan interrupted soft, urgent. "We don't need to go through every line." It's standard. His tone wasn't reassuring, it was hurried. Sarah hesitated, pen hovering. I just want to understand what I'm signing. Ethan exhaled sharply, not angry, but impatient, as if time were running out. Sarah, we already talked about this. The risks, the surgery, everything. His voice cracked in practiced vulnerability. I just need you with me. Please. I can't take more delays. Those words hit her harder than fear could. So she nodded, and she began signing. Signature after signature, line after line. The pen moved faster with each page, as if love were a race she needed to win. One sheet stood out, not because she read it, but because Ethan slid his hand over it before she reached for it. Just sign here, he murmured, guiding her finger to the bottom line. The paper felt heavier than the rest. There was a small hesitation, barely a fraction of a second, but enough for something inside her to whisper, "Wrong." Still, she ignored it. Ink touched paper. Her handwriting looked steady, but her pulse was not. That was the moment, the exact second, when trust became a weapon. The administrator gathered the papers and smiled politely. All documents will be sent to processing and insurance approval. Insurance? Sarah blinked. Insurance? She thought it meant standard medical billing. Nothing more. But Ethan's eyes flickered not with love, not with relief, but with satisfaction. A quiet, chilling satisfaction. Later, when they waited alone in the hospital prep room, Ethan took her hand. I knew you'd do this for us, he whispered. Not thank you. Not I'm grateful. Not even I love you. Just expectation disguised as gratitude. Sarah swallowed, pretending she hadn't noticed the difference. Because once you give someone a part of your body, you can't afford to question whether they deserve it. When a nurse entered to confirm final surgical protocol, Sarah forced herself to smile. But her eyes drifted to a folder in the nurse's hand. Her name was printed on the label alongside Ethan's, but something else was stamped beneath it. Additional coverage authorization. Beneficiary assignment, secondary policy claim rights. She didn't understand what it meant. Not yet. But someday she would. Someday, those words would be the match that lit the fire she never knew she'd need. For now, all she knew was this. She had signed the papers. She had chosen love. And love, she believed, was worth the risk. But fate would prove something darker. Love is not dangerous. Blind trust is. And the ink she signed that morning wasn't just consent. It was the beginning of her unraveling. There are moments in life that feel suspended, where time doesn't move forward or backward, but simply holds its breath. The morning of the surgery was one of those moments. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and cold metal. Machines hummed like distant machinery preparing for war. Sarah lay in her pre-op bed, staring at the ceiling as a thin sheet covered her body not for warmth, but for protocol. Nurses moved around her efficiently, attaching tubing, adjusting monitors, confirming identity bands. Everything was routine, but nothing felt routine. Because today wasn't just a medical procedure. It was a vow with no ceremony, a sacrifice with no applause. A choice that felt like love absolute and irreversible. Ethan was wheeled into her bay before surgery, a rare privilege reserved for final words, family connection, emotional preparation. He looked fragile, dramatically fragile, his cheeks sunken, his breathing uneven, his eyes glossy with a mixture of fear and desperation. And then he reached for her hand. Sarah, his voice was weak, trembling, almost rehearsed. If I don't make it, I need you to know something. Sarah felt her heart stop just for a second. He swallowed, eyes locked on hers like she was the last piece of the world still holding him in place. You saved me before the surgery even started because you stayed. Tears slipped down Sarah's cheeks before she even realized she was crying. This was why she said yes. Not because she had to, not because someone expected her to, But because at the core of everything, she believed in them. In marriage. In forever. In us. She squeezed his hand. "You're not going anywhere," she whispered. And then the countdown. An anesthesiologist entered. A mask lowered. A voice said, "Deep breath and let go." And the world went silent. Hours later, Sarah drifted awake, the world blurry, soft, distant. Pain pulsed through her body, deep and sharp, the kind only surgery leaves behind. But even through the haze, one instinct cut through the fog. "Where is Ethan?" A nurse smiled gently. "He's stable." The transplant was successful. Relief hit her like oxygen. She had given him life, literally. Later, when they finally allowed Ethan into her recovery room, he was pale but awake, wrapped in monitors and hospital blankets. He looked at her like she was something holy. Slowly, painfully, he reached for her hand, the same hand she had used to sign the papers. And with tears sliding down his face, he whispered, "Sarah, you saved my life. If you weren't here, I would be dead." She couldn't speak. The emotion was too big, too overwhelming. She nodded, crying softly. This moment felt like the truth. But truth isn't always loud. Sometimes truth is quiet. Like the faint tightening of muscles near Ethan's jaw, a flicker easily mistaken for pain, but closer to calculation. Or the way his tears stopped just a little too quickly. Or the subtle exhale not of relief, but of victory. Sarah didn't see it. Not yet. She only saw the man she loved alive. She only felt gratitude, connection, renewed faith, and in the glow of that fragile moment, she believed something dangerous. The sacrifice had brought them closer. But love built on deception doesn't grow. It waits, silent, patient, and sooner or later, it shows its true face. At first, the change was almost invisible. A missed text, a shorter tone, a smile that felt slightly delayed, like his face had to remember how to make it. Sarah told herself it was normal. Healing takes energy. Recovering from surgery wasn't just physical, it was emotional. At least that's what she repeated like a prayer she hoped would become true. But the shift grew louder. Not in words, in silence. Ethan began keeping his phone face down. Once, twice, then always. When it buzzed, he'd glance at it, then at her, not with guilt, but calculation before sliding it into his pocket like a secret. His recovery, once filled with gratitude and tenderness, turned into independence almost overnight. One morning, Sarah entered the living room and found Ethan standing without assistance, pacing while talking on the phone. His posture was strong, confident. Nothing about him looked fragile anymore. But when Sarah approached, he turned his back mid-sentence, lowering his voice. She stopped, listening, trying to catch pieces of the conversation hiding in the silence between his pauses. No, she won't question it. Later. Not now. I said I'll handle it. Then the final line, the one that stayed like a stain on her ribcage. She owes me. After everything. Her breath hitched. Owes him? For saving his life. Something cold slipped into her bloodstream, something she didn't have a name for yet. Later that evening, Sarah cooked dinner his favorite pasta, soft foods recommended for recovery. Ethan sat at the table scrolling on his phone. Not once did he look up. "Dinner's ready," she said softly, placing the plate in front of him. He didn't nod, didn't thank her. He just forked one bite into his mouth, still reading something on the screen. No smile, no warmth, no recognition that the woman across from him had removed an organ from her body so he could stay alive. But then he added casually, coldly, "You put too much salt." Not "I appreciate this." Not "thanks for taking care of me." Just critique. Just distance. Just the first open crack in what Sarah once believed was love. Days passed, and Ethan began leaving the house more frequently. Work meeting. Investor call. Errand. He didn't offer details and didn't want questions. Sarah tried to bring it up gently, one evening when his jacket still smelled like unfamiliar perfume, subtle, expensive, intentional. "How are the meetings going?" His response sliced through the air. "Can you not hover? I need space." The words startled her. Hover? She had changed his dressings, managed his medication schedule, kept track of follow-up appointments, helped him walk during the first painful days. She wasn't hovering. She was caring. But suddenly it felt wrong, like her love had become an inconvenience. Then came the moment she couldn't ignore. Sarah walked into his office to drop insurance paperwork the hospital requested. His laptop screen was open. A message thread. The preview line read, "She signed everything, just like you said she would." Her heart stopped. Her stomach dropped. And in that suspended second, everything clicked. The secrecy, the impatience, the sudden disappearance of gratitude, the shift in tone. This wasn't recovery. This was transition. He wasn't her husband returning to himself. He was someone shedding the version of him that still needed her. Sarah stepped back, trying to steady her breathing. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She wasn't his partner. She wasn't his wife. She was a stepping stone, a body part, a solution, someone used then discarded. The walls felt thinner, the air colder, the house suddenly unfamiliar, like she was living in a stranger's story. And for the first time, the question she never wanted to ask entered her mind fully, without apology, without resistance. Who was I to him, really? Not wife, not soulmate, not love, just access, just convenience, just a signature. And the most devastating truth of all, she gave him life, and in return, he was slowly erasing hers. There are sentences that bruise, and then there are sentences that break bone. For Sarah, it came on a Tuesday morning, painfully ordinary, painfully quiet. She was folding laundry in the living room, warm clothes fresh from the dryer, the soft rhythm almost comforting. Ethan walked in with a calmness that didn't match the tension hanging in the air. No anger, no argument, no explanation leading up to it. Just a statement rehearsed, polished, practiced. "Sarah, we're going in different directions. I want a divorce." Her hands froze mid-fold. For a moment, she genuinely wondered if she heard wrong, if maybe fatigue, pain meds, the emotional strain of the last few months distorted his voice. But his expression wasn't confused. It was certain, cold, final. She forced a small laugh, the kind people make when reality feels too ridiculous to accept. "Ethan, what are you talking about? We're still recovering. He cut her off gently, almost kindly. "It's already done." That was the moment her stomach dropped. Already done. 2 words that erased years. Ethan walked to the dining table and placed a folder in front of her. She recognized the smell of printer ink, new paper, legal formatting. Her throat tightened. Inside were documents stamped with phrases that sliced deeper than any scalpel. Petition for dissolution of marriage, property allocation summary, asset transfer approval, beneficiary update authorization. Her eyes darted across pages, searching for something familiar, something shared, something fair. There wasn't any. Ethan continued speaking, voice disturbingly calm. "I've already met with an attorney. The evaluation is complete. Everything is structured fairly." Fairly? Her chest tightened. Fair would mean partnership. Fair would mean shared decisions. Fair would mean acknowledgement of her sacrifice. But as she scanned the pages, dread crawled up her spine. The house transferred, savings transferred, joint investments reassigned, retirement plan beneficiary changed, insurance policy amended. Everything. Everything she thought belonged to both of them now showed only his name. No space for hers. No trace of hers. No protection for hers. Her voice came out fragile, cracking. When did you do all this?" Ethan exhaled not regretfully but impatiently. Before the surgery, I needed to be prepared. Prepared. Prepared for her life to save his. Prepared to walk away the moment he didn't need her anymore. Prepared for a future where she existed only as a memory and a medical donor. Sarah's hands shook as she flipped another page, one stamped. Sign here if you agree to expedited processing. Expedited. Like she was paperwork. Like she was an inconvenience to resolve efficiently. Her eyes lifted to him, to the man she once believed fate had chosen for her. What about everything we built? She whispered. Ethan shrugged. You'll be fine. You're strong. You'll move on. Move on. From what? From giving up her body? Her trust? Her life? Her voice hardened just slightly, but enough to sound like someone who remembers their worth. You planned this the entire time. His jaw tensed, one small twitch of irritation, the first crack in his polished performance. Then he answered, Let's not make this emotional. It doesn't change anything. But it did. In that second, every moment she had doubted herself, every red flag she had softened, every instinct she ignored snapped into place. She wasn't losing her marriage. She had lost it long ago, she just hadn't seen the paperwork yet. The folder remained on the table between them, silent, heavy, undeniable. Ethan turned to walk away. But before leaving the room, he paused, expression unreadable, and added, Just sign it, Sarah. We both know this is better for us. Then he left. No apology, no hesitation, no backward glance. Just footsteps fading down the hallway of the house she no longer owned. Sarah sat there, still holding the papers, feeling the world tilt. She had given him a kidney. He had taken everything else. And in the suffocating stillness of that room, one truth finally formed sharp, undeniable, unstoppable. He didn't fall out of love. He got what he wanted, and now he no longer needed her. But what Ethan didn't know, what he couldn't predict, was this. The woman he underestimated wasn't broken. She was awakening. And one day soon, he would regret the day he handed her the proof. Some betrayals break your heart. Others break your entire life. For Sarah, the truth didn't hit all at once. It came in pieces like shards of glass she didn't realize she was holding until they started cutting her. It began with a letter. A white envelope tucked between bills on the kitchen counter. The return address belonged to an insurance company she didn't recognize. At first, she assumed it was a mistake, but when she opened it, her breath stopped. Inside was a statement confirming Ethan's updated policy. Primary beneficiary, Ethan Green. Insured party, Sarah Miller kidney donor. Her name. Her body. Her risk. His payout. Her fingers trembled as she scanned the fine print. A lump formed in her throat. Coverage for post-transplant medical complications. Coverage for fatal surgical outcome. Coverage for donor loss of life. She swallowed hard. This wasn't protection. This was preparation. Not for her recovery, but for her death. She rushed to Ethan's office, the one he kept locked until recently. But he had gotten careless now that he believed the game was already won. Inside, filing cabinets lined the walls, each labeled neatly. She pulled drawers open one after another. Documents, contracts, transfer authorizations, loans, investment property deeds, all with one horrifying consistency. Her signature. Signatures she didn't remember signing. Signatures placed neatly beside insurance stamps and legal witness marks. One file stopped her cold. Mortgage expansion approval, secondary property investment. Another, equity loan against joint assets secured with medical consent file. And then the worst one, life insurance payout directive, 3.2 million USD. Her knees nearly gave out. Not because of the number, but because the number made something clear. There was more value in her dead than alive. She staggered back, clutching one folder, breathing sharp and shallow. Her mind raced. How long had he been planning this? Before the diagnosis? Before the surgery? Before she ever thought something was wrong? She wanted to scream, but what came out instead was a whisper, small, broken, terrified. He used me, not just emotionally, not just physically, legally, financially, medically. She had been a resource, not a wife. When Ethan returned home, she confronted him, voice shaking, folder clutched like a shield. I found everything. The loans. The insurance. My signature on documents I never saw. Ethan didn't panic. He didn't deny it. He simply shrugged. Sarah, don't make this dramatic. It's just business. Business. She blinked, stunned. You're talking about my life. My body. My name. He sighed, already bored. You should calm down. The more emotional you get, the more unstable you look. Those words weren't careless. They were strategic. A warning. A setup. A weapon. The next morning, the knock on the door wasn't the sound of apology. It was law enforcement. A sheriff's deputy stood on the porch, holding documents. Ma'am, due to updated ownership records, you are no longer legally listed as a resident of this property. You have 48 hours to vacate. Sarah stared at him numb. This is my house. He didn't argue. He didn't comfort. He just repeated, not anymore. As she packed what she could fit into a single suitcase, Ethan stood in the hallway watching, arms crossed, face unreadable. Not guilty, not regretful, not conflicted, just done. You'll land on your feet, he said casually. People like you always do. But Sarah didn't answer, because something inside her was changing. A quiet fire. A shift deeper than heartbreak. She walked out the door, no home, no money, no safety net. But she carried one thing Ethan never expected her to have. The truth. And someday soon, that truth would become his undoing. There are moments when the world doesn't end loudly. No screaming, no crashing glass, no dramatic goodbye. Sometimes it ends quietly, with a small suitcase, a closed door, and a silence so heavy it feels like it has weight. Sarah stood in the doorway of her friend Mia's spare bedroom, a room meant for guests, temporary stays, weekend visits. Not for someone who had once believed she was building a family, a marriage, a future. The room smelled faintly of lavender detergent. There was a neatly made bed with a single pillow, a folded blanket waiting. It should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt like exile. Mia tried to help, gently placing a hand on Sarah's shoulder. Stay as long as you need. Seriously. But Sarah couldn't respond. Her voice wasn't gone. It was trapped behind everything she still couldn't process. So she just nodded. Mia stepped back, hesitated, then whispered, You didn't deserve this. But Sarah wasn't ready to believe that. Not yet. Hours passed. The house grew quiet. The world outside darkened. And inside that small room, Sarah finally allowed herself to feel it. All of it. She opened the suitcase. Inside a few folded clothes, her medical records, a toothbrush, and the hospital wristband she still hadn't thrown away. A life reduced to what could fit into one carry-on. She placed her hand over her stomach where the incision still pulled with every breath. The stitches were healing, but the wound beneath was not. She lifted her shirt slightly, staring at the long healing line across her skin, the proof of what she gave. Her sacrifice carved into her body. Her eyes blurred with tears. It wasn't the physical pain. It was something far deeper, the feeling of being replaced, erased, disposable. The refrigerator in the kitchen was nearly empty, a half bottle of water, a jar of mustard, and an old bag of lettuce no one remembered buying. She wasn't hungry, but hunger wasn't the absence of food. It was the absence of comfort. So she closed the door and walked back to the guest room. She sat on the edge of the bed, the springs creaked softly under her weight, and then finally the numbness cracked. She buried her face in her hands. The first sob escaped like something torn from her chest. Not loud, not dramatic, but broken. The kind of cry only people who have held themselves together too long understand. Later, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror. The fluorescent light was unkind. It revealed everything. The tiredness in her eyes, the fading hospital tape marks on her skin, the slight swelling near her incision, the exhaustion not from surgery but from betrayal. She stared at her reflection, a stranger wearing her face, and with a voice barely more than breath, she whispered, "I gave him life and he erased mine." The words trembled, not because they were weak, but because they were true. She wiped her face, but tears kept falling slow, uncontrollable. Not grief for him, grief for the woman she used to be, the one who believed love meant sacrifice, the one who believed trust guaranteed safety, the one who believed saving someone meant they would value her. That version of her was gone, and standing in her place was someone raw, wounded, but waking up. As she crawled into bed and pulled the blanket over herself, the room felt unbearably quiet. But somewhere beneath the pain, beneath the numbness, something small flickered. Not hope, not yet, but something close. A question she wasn't ready to answer but couldn't ignore anymore. If I survived losing him, what else could I survive? Then finally exhausted, she closed her eyes, and for the first time since the surgery, she slept. But this time she didn't dream of him. She dreamed of becoming someone he could never break again. Healing doesn't always begin with hope. Sometimes it begins with anger. And sometimes it begins with one sentence that finally names the pain. The therapist's office was quiet, too quiet. Soft beige walls, plants that looked too alive, a clock that ticked just loud enough to remind Sarah she was still here. Still breathing, still broken, still angry. She sat on the couch with her hands locked together in her lap, trying to hold herself still as if movement might make everything collapse again. Across from her sat Dr. Harper, calm, steady, observant, a woman who didn't rush, a woman who listened like silence was a language. After a long pause, Dr. Harper finally spoke. "Sarah, what happened to you wasn't a bad breakup. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't miscommunication." She leaned forward just slightly enough for the words to land. It was coercive control. The phrase hit harder than any insult, any betrayal, any lie. For a second, Sarah just stared, unblinking. And then she whispered, confused, "What does that mean?" "Doctor?" Harper's voice remained soft, but unshakably firm. "It means someone doesn't need to hit you to own you." Sarah swallowed. Her chest tightened. The therapist continued. "It means control disguised as care, decisions disguised as protection, dependence disguised as love. It's subtle, strategic, and designed so you don't see the trap until you're already inside it." Sarah felt heat rise behind her eyes, not grief. Recognition, memory, patterns, moments she dismissed, comments she excused, silences she absorbed. And suddenly, it wasn't just emotional, it was clinical, visible, obvious. Like symptoms she should have diagnosed sooner. A tremor ran through her as she whispered, "So, it wasn't my fault." "Doctor?" Harper didn't hesitate. "No, it was calculated." Sarah's breath hitched, but this time it wasn't because she was falling apart. It was because she was waking up. Later that night, back in the guest room, she opened her laptop. Not to look at old photos, not to reread messages, but to investigate. Her hands moved with a precision she hadn't felt in months. Normal people would scroll, cry, search for closure. But Sarah wasn't normal. Sarah was an emergency room nurse. Her job wasn't emotion, it was pattern. She knew how to track timelines, how to compare data, how to read what wasn't written. She pulled her medical records first, then the insurance correspondence, then financial statements, loan approvals, beneficiary changes, contract timestamps. She lined them up not emotionally, but analytically. Her pain turned into evidence. Her confusion turned into structure. Her heartbreak turned into strategy. And the more she looked, the more the truth sharpened. Nothing about Ethan's betrayal was spontaneous. It was planned, step by step, document by document, signature by signature. He thought she wouldn't notice. He thought she couldn't fight, because he forgot who she used to be. Hours passed. Coffee went cold beside her. The room turned darker. But Sarah didn't stop. Not until the timeline was complete. Not until every lie had a date. Not until every forged signature had a counterpart. And when she finally sat back, the exhaustion wasn't crushing. It was empowering. Because now she wasn't drowning. Now she was preparing. She stared at the files on the screen, not with sadness, but with something new. A spark, a beginning, a future that was no longer about survival, but justice. She whispered to herself the same way a soldier might whisper a vow before battle. I am not done. And then more certain, more fierce, almost like prayer. He stole from the wrong woman. Because Sarah finally remembered something Ethan never expected her to. She didn't just give life. She knew how to prove who tried to ruin it. And now, she was ready to turn every piece of evidence into a weapon, not for revenge, but for truth. Revenge isn't rage, not the real kind. Real revenge is precision. It is patience sharpened into strategy. And for the first time in months, Sarah wasn't falling apart. She was building something. Not hope. Not closure. A case. Her laptop screen glowed in the dim guest room documents, screenshots, timestamps, financial statements layered like puzzle pieces. She wasn't skimming anymore. She was dissecting. Every bank transfer, every insurance policy change, every digital signature. She mapped them on a timeline. Color-coded, cross-referenced, undeniable. Patterns emerged. Not random, not emotional, intentional. A plan built long before he ever got sick, long before she ever signed her name. She downloaded every document she could access, even the ones Ethan never expected she would find. Encrypted files, metadata logs, email server backups, proxy accounts tied to burner numbers. Her keyboard clicked like a heartbeat. She wasn't crying now. She wasn't shaking. She was working. The way she had worked in the ER when seconds decided whether someone lived or died, only this time, the life she was trying to save was her own. But information wasn't enough. She needed expertise. She needed a weapon with a law degree. So she walked into the small brick building that housed the North Valley Community Legal Resource Center, a place she never imagined needing. There were flyers about tenant rights, restraining orders, and financial abuse. A receptionist looked up and asked gently, "Are you here because someone hurt you?" Sarah paused, then answered, "No." A beat. Then her voice hardened steady, controlled. "I'm here because someone underestimated me." That was how she met Rachel Thompson. Rachel didn't smile politely. She didn't offer tissues. She didn't speak softly. She was direct, sharp, clinical, a woman whose reputation wasn't kind, but effective. She skimmed Sarah's stack of evidence barely 10 minutes before she exhaled slowly and sat back. Insurance fraud, identity misuse, financial coercion, forgery, medical consent manipulation. She looked up, eyes razor cold. He built a system to profit off your potential death. That's not a divorce case. That's a multi-felony trail. Sarah's breath caught, not from pain, from validation. Finally, someone saw it. Not as drama, not as heartbreak, but as crime. Rachel tapped her pen. "Before we move forward, I need to know one thing." Her tone shifted, not softer, but heavier. "Are you doing this to hurt him or to reclaim yourself?" Sarah didn't hesitate. "Both." For the first time, Rachel's expression shifted barely, but enough to reveal respect. Good, she said, because the system protects people like him until someone like you refuses to disappear. Together they built call logs, financial subpoenas, digital footprint tracking. Rachel pulled favor after favor from forensic accountants, medical ethics consultants, and cybersecurity analysts. Every signature Ethan forged? Traced. Every financial move? Documented. Every silent manipulation? Named. The file grew thicker, more dangerous, more undeniable. Late one night, as Sarah reviewed yet another screen full of evidence, her reflection appeared on the dark laptop glass. Not the broken woman from before, not the abandoned wife, not the victim, but someone rebuilt, someone calculating, focused, awake. She whispered not as confession, but as vow. He stole my life. Now I'm taking back every piece, because this was no longer about what Ethan did to her. It was about what she was about to do to him. And now, she wasn't alone. She had the truth. She had proof. And she had Rachel, which meant Ethan Green for the first time had something to fear. Courtrooms aren't built for comfort. They're built for truth, even when the truth arrives late. The air inside felt heavy, thick with fluorescent light and polished wood. Every chair, every whisper, every quiet pause carried weight. Sarah sat beside her attorney, Rachel Thompson, calm, composed, and terrifying in her quiet confidence. Ethan sat across the room. He wore a tailored suit, a practiced smile, and the smug expression of a man who believed he had already won. His eyes met Sarah's not with regret, with amusement. Like this was still a game, like she was still losing. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The trial began. What followed wasn't dramatic shouting or emotional monologues. It was something far more dangerous. Facts. Cold. Documented. Time-stamped. Rachel stood and spoke with a voice sharp enough to cut glass. Your Honor, this is not a civil matter. This is not marital dispute. This is a criminal pattern, premeditated and profit-driven. She tapped a folder. We will show intent. We will show digital manipulation. And we will show motive. Ethan leaned back, smiling confident, relaxed. That confidence lasted exactly 4 minutes. The first exhibit appeared on the courtroom screen. A scanned image of Sarah's medical consent documents, overlaid with metadata timestamps. Then Rachel zoomed in. Highlighted text flashed. Signature timestamp 3 days before surgery authorization. IP address Ethan Green's home office. Device laptop registered to his business account. The courtroom shifted. Someone inhaled sharply. Ethan blinked slow, confused, but still he smiled. Then came financial logs, insurance beneficiary updates, loan applications, property transfers, all with one chilling pattern. Her signature applied digitally from his devices. Rachel continued. While my client was undergoing medical evaluation, Mr. Green filed 3 separate financial instruments dependent on her death. Murmurs spread through the room. Ethan's smile faltered barely. Then Rachel called the expert witness, a cybersecurity forensic analyst. Calm voice, neutral tone. Devastating testimony. Yes, Your Honor. These forms were signed using credential spoofing. The system registered her identity, but logs confirm the signer was Mr. Green. One juror shifted uncomfortably. Another, a middle-aged woman, folded her hands, her expression tightening. Rachel wasn't finished. She pressed a button. A final document appeared. A message thread. Ethan's words. She signed everything, just like you said she would. Silence. Real silence. The kind that doesn't just fill the room. It crushes the person sitting in it. Ethan's face changed. Not outrage. Not denial. Fear. The first real emotion he'd shown all day. Rachel stepped forward slowly, not rushing, not dramatic, just lethal. Your Honor, these actions reflect insurance fraud, identity misuse, financial abuse, medical consent misrepresentation, and attempted economic exploitation intended to activate upon her death. She turned slightly, eyes fixed on Ethan. This was not a marriage. It was a calculated financial harvest. The judge nodded gravely, but the moment that mattered wasn't legal. It was human. From the jury box, the 50-year-old woman, the same one who had stiffened earlier, closed her eyes and softly shook her head. Not at Sarah, at him, at what he had done, at the type of man who could look at the woman who saved his life and decide she was worth more dead. Ethan saw her expression, and for the first time, he understood. This wasn't turning. It had already turned. His jaw clenched. His hands tightened. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something raw, something vulnerable, something terrified. Sarah didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply breathed steadily, fully, freely. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't drowning. She wasn't surviving. She was winning. And the courtroom, sterile, cold, unforgiving, became the place where everything finally shifted, where his lies became evidence, where her pain became testimony, where justice stopped being a hope and became a consequence. And in that silence, the kind that follows truth, one thought echoed louder than any sentence. He didn't destroy her. He created the version of her that would destroy him. Some endings aren't tragic. Some endings are necessary. And this one wasn't written in anger, it was written in evidence. The courtroom was quieter than before, not tense now, but waiting. Judge Rivera adjusted her glasses, lifted the final ruling file, and began reading with a tone that held no emotion, but all authority. "Defendant Ethan Green," she said, voice carrying across the wood-paneled room, "this court finds you guilty of insurance fraud, identity misuse, financial abuse, medical consent misrepresentation, and attempted exploitation for financial gain." There was no gasp, no outcry, just a stillness, the kind that happens when truth finally settles in a room. Ethan sat stiffly beside his attorney. The arrogance he wore in earlier hearings was gone, replaced with a hollow, stunned silence. Rachel didn't look at him. Sarah didn't either. He wasn't worth the acknowledgement anymore. Next to him sat Emily, the woman who once smiled behind hidden text messages and whispered promises of after everything falls into place. Now she stared straight forward, mascara streaked, shoulder trembling as the judge continued. Both defendants are sentenced to 5 years in state custody, plus financial restitution totaling $3.2 million. Additionally, all transferred assets, properties, and liquid accounts shall be returned to the rightful owner, Ms. Sarah Miller. Ethan's jaw clenched, but he didn't speak. Not because he accepted the judgment, but because there was nothing left to argue. No lies, no excuses. No angle, just consequences. Rachel leaned towards Sarah and whispered, "It's over." But Sarah knew the truth. It wasn't over. It was balanced. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. Reporters stepped forward immediately. Microphones lifted. Questions flooded the air. Is it true he planned the insurance policy before the surgery? Did you know your signature was being forged? How does it feel to win? Someone from a local news station spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. The community is calling this the medical donor betrayal case. What do you want people to understand? Sarah blinked slowly, not overwhelmed. Grounded. Clear. She didn't look at the cameras. She looked at the women watching from behind them, women holding their breath, women with fear in their eyes, women who knew silence too well. Then she spoke. No one deserves to be harmed in the name of love. No one deserves to be manipulated because they trusted the wrong person. And if someone tries to erase your life, She paused, her voice steady and calm. You have the right to rebuild it and expose theirs. A ripple moved through the crowd, not shock, but recognition. Empathy, respect, strength. News outlets ran the story that evening. Headlines appeared across the region. Kidney donor betrayed by husband, justice served. Financial abuse case sets new legal precedent. Survivor turns evidence into conviction. People talked. People learned. People paid attention. And somewhere in a cell across county lines, Ethan Green watched the news on a small mounted television, jaw tight, eyes dark, hands clenched around nothing. The world finally saw him not as a husband, not as a businessman, not as a victim of circumstance, but as what he truly was, a predator who miscalculated his prey. Meanwhile, Sarah walked out of the courthouse into fresh air, real air that didn't feel heavy anymore. She didn't rush. She didn't shake. She simply existed fully present, fully whole. The scar across her abdomen was still there. But now it wasn't a symbol of exploitation. It was proof of survival, proof that he didn't break her. He forged her into someone stronger, smarter, untouchable. At the bottom of the courthouse steps, Rachel asked quietly, "So what now?" Sarah smiled, a small one, but real. "Now," she said, "I live." And for the first time since everything began. That word felt true. Some scars remain, not as reminders of pain, but proof that healing happened. For Sarah, the world didn't magically become bright again. Life didn't go back to what it was. It went forward. Some days were slow. Some days hurt. Some days victory looked like simply breathing without breaking. But day by day, something changed. She wasn't surviving anymore. She was rebuilding. Months passed. Her name, once buried under forged signatures and lies, now appeared on something else. A foundation certificate. Centered in bold letters. The Miller Advocacy Network for Medical Fraud Survivors. The first of its kind in the region. A space where people who had been manipulated, coerced, financially trapped under the disguise of love could walk in not ashamed, not afraid, just seen. Sarah sat in the small office she rented, nothing fancy. Neutral walls, second-hand furniture, donated laptops. But it felt right. It felt earned. It felt hers. A volunteer stepped in. "They're ready for you." The auditorium wasn't enormous, but every seat was filled. Students, survivors, clinicians, advocates, women gripping notebooks with quiet determination, men sitting with arms crossed, listening harder than they pretended. And in the front row, someone Sarah would never forget. The juror who shook her head in the courtroom. She smiled softly, as if saying without words, "I'm still with you." Sarah stepped onto the small stage. The lights warmed her skin. A microphone waited. She wasn't nervous. Not anymore. She looked out at the audience, at the curious, the hurting, the hopeful. She took a breath and began. When someone says love requires sacrifice, we tend to nod without thinking. A pause. A gentle shift. But there's a difference between sacrifice and surrender. Between partnership and power imbalance. Between love, she held up her hand scar visible, unapologetic, and control. Silence, but not empty silence, charged silence. She continued. Coercive control doesn't always start with violence. Sometimes it starts with attention, with validation, with the feeling that someone finally sees you just before they take your ability to see yourself. A woman in the third row wiped a tear. A man lowered his gaze. Sarah's voice deepened, not louder, but fuller. Love does not erase you. Love does not isolate you. Love does not rewrite your identity until you no longer recognize yourself. She breathed in slow, grounded. My story is not about a failed marriage. It's about a system designed to silence the person being harmed, and about what happens when that person refuses to stay silent. She let the next line land gently like truth, not anger. Dedication can be love. But control disguised as love is abuse. Some people nodded. Some closed their eyes. Some simply exhaled for the first time in a long time. When the applause began, it wasn't explosive. It was steady. Growing. Strength building on strength. Not celebration. Recognition. Sarah smiled small, calm, unforced. The kind of smile that comes from knowing the storm is behind you. And you didn't drown. You transformed. As the camera slowly pulled back, capturing her on stage, the scar, the strength, the quiet defiance that became purpose, she didn't think of Ethan. Or the courtroom. Or the betrayal. She thought of the moment she whispered to a mirror. I gave him life and he erased mine. And how wrong she was. Because now she knew he didn't erase her. He revealed her. She was no longer someone's patient, no longer someone's donor, no longer someone's sacrifice. She was her own, finally, fully, unafraid. And as the screen faded, her final truth remained not as warning, but invitation. You are not powerless. You are not alone. And you are never too late to reclaim your life. Sometimes the hardest stories aren't the ones filled with tragedy, but the ones where someone survives it. Sarah's journey wasn't just about betrayal, loss, or justice. It was about rediscovery, about learning that love without respect becomes control, and silence becomes the cage that keeps it alive. She walked through heartbreak, deception, manipulation, and loneliness. She faced a system that expected her to stay quiet. But instead of breaking, she learned to speak, not with anger, but with truth. And that truth changed everything. Because Sarah is not just a survivor of what was done to her. She is the author of what comes next. A reminder that healing doesn't erase the past. It rewrites its meaning. So if you ever find yourself in a chapter that hurts, a chapter you didn't choose, a chapter that feels like an ending, remember this: you are allowed to begin again. You are allowed to reclaim your voice. And you are allowed to write a future where you are no longer someone's sacrifice, but your own strength. Thank you for watching this series and for feeling this story with us. If Sarah's journey stayed with you, even a little, please make sure to subscribe, like, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story we tell, because somewhere out there, someone else is waiting to know they're not alone. And your support helps this story reach them. Until then, take care of yourself, fight for your worth, and never forget, your story isn't over yet.